I said one word no to my brother, and my quiet, predictable life outside Columbus cracked overnight. By morning, the spot where my car always sat was empty. Then the next call I got made it clear this wasn't theft. It was a message from someone who knew exactly how to trap me. My name is Ethan, I'm 38, and I live outside Columbus, Ohio. I'm the kind of guy who likes predictable things: steady work, a quiet home, a paid-off car that starts every morning, and a calendar that doesn't surprise me. For the last 11 years, I've worked as a maintenance supervisor for a mid-sized logistics warehouse. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. If a conveyor belt stops, if a forklift charger dies, if a dock door won't seal in January, I'm the guy they call. I'm good at it. I like being good at something that's real and measurable. You fix it, it works, you go home. And for most of my adult life, going home also meant carrying a weight I didn't talk about much. My family's constant expectation that I would be the one to absorb problems, not because I was the oldest. I'm not. My brother Mark is older by 3 years. Mark is 41. But in our family, Mark has always been the son, and I've always been the utility pole. Everything somehow tilted toward him, and I was expected to stand there and hold up whatever leaned. I'll tell you what I mean, because if you didn't grow up in a house like that, it can sound dramatic when you say it out loud. Mark was the big personality, the funny one at holidays, the one who talked his way out of trouble. Teachers said he was bright but bored. Coaches said he had potential. My parents took that word potential and used it like a lottery ticket they refused to throw away. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the one who didn't need much, the one who could handle himself, which in our family language translated to, Ethan will adjust, Ethan will make it work, Ethan won't embarrass us. So when I started earning real money in my late 20s, it didn't take long before my phone started ringing for reasons that had nothing to do with birthdays or catching up. At first it was little stuff. Can you spot Mark a couple hundred until Friday? His paycheck is weird this week. He had a flat tire, and he's stressed. And I did it because I thought it was temporary. Because I thought, okay, he's older, he's hitting a rough patch, and family helps family. I was raised on that sentence. But the truth is, it wasn't a rough patch. It was a pattern. Mark bounced between jobs like every manager he ever had was unreasonable, and every workplace was toxic. He always had a story, always had an explanation, always had someone else to blame, and every time he landed somewhere new, my parents would act like this was it. This was the turning point. This was when he would finally settle down. He never did. By the time I was 35, I'd quietly become the bridge between Mark's decisions and Mark's consequences. The difference between his car getting repossessed and him keeping it. The difference between his rent being late and him getting evicted. The difference between him being forced to move back in with our parents and him being able to tell people he was doing fine. And to be clear, Mark didn't come to me humbly. He didn't come embarrassed. He came like it was owed, like I was withholding something that belonged to him. Sometimes he'd ask directly. Sometimes he'd go through our mom, because that worked better. If I said no to Mark, he'd argue. If I said no to our mom, she'd cry. So yeah, I paid for a lot of things I wasn't proud of paying for. I didn't keep a spreadsheet, but I could have. 1,000 here, 300 there, just until I'm back on my feet. I heard that phrase so many times it started to feel like background noise. The thing is, it didn't just affect my bank account. It affected how I lived. I wasn't reckless with money, but I wasn't exactly free either. I drove the same car for years because it ran and it was paid off. I didn't take trips. I didn't upgrade my apartment until I finally moved into a small rented house and promised myself I would stop being the emergency fund for a grown man. That house was the first adult decision I made that felt like it belonged to me. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a tiny garage that barely fit my car, and a backyard big enough to mow in 20 minutes. But it was quiet, mine, my name on the lease, my key, my rules, and the biggest rule I set, mostly in my own head, was that I was done being manipulated. My car matters to this story, so I want to be specific about it. It was a dark gray 2018 Honda Accord. Not a luxury car, not a project car, just reliable. The kind of car you buy because you need your life to function, not because you're trying to prove anything. I kept it clean, kept up with maintenance, and I had a habit of parking it the same way every time. Nose in, slightly to the left, because the garage door had a weird angle. Mark, on the other hand, treated cars like they were disposable. He'd drive something until it started making a noise, ignore it, then act shocked when it died. And whenever his car died, Guess whose car suddenly became the family car he could borrow? Mine. It started with, "Hey, can I take it to run a quick errand?" Then, "Hey, mine won't start. Can I take yours to work just today?" Then, "Hey, you're not using it on Saturday, right?" And every time there was this unspoken assumption that I would say yes, that I didn't really have plans, that my life was flexible and his life was urgent. I set boundaries slowly, because that's what you do when you've been trained not to upset anyone. I'd say, "Bring it back by 6, or "I need it in the morning," or "Put gas in it." Little lines in the sand that I hoped would teach him something. They didn't teach him anything except how to step over them. The moment I realized it had crossed into something uglier was when he started acting like he had authority over me because I helped him. There's a particular tone someone uses when they think you're trapped. Mark developed it like a skill. He'd sigh into the phone like I was exhausting him, like my questions were unreasonable. "You're really going to make this difficult? Wow, okay. Didn't know you were like that. Must be nice to just not worry about anyone else." And then our mom would call. "Ethan, honey, your brother is just stressed. He's trying, you know how he gets." As if stress excused everything. As if trying mattered more than actually changing. The breaking point wasn't even a huge dramatic fight. It was something small enough that if I explained it to someone outside my family, they might not understand why it mattered. Mark asked me for $2,000. Not $200. Not $300. $2,000. He called on a Tuesday night, casual like he was asking if I'd seen a game score. "Hey, I need $2,000, like by tomorrow." I actually laughed at first because I thought it was a joke. When I realized he was serious, I asked the obvious question, "For what?" He hesitated for half a second, just long enough for me to feel it. It's this thing. It's a situation." "What situation?" "I can't get into it, okay? It's complicated." That right there. That was the moment something in me tightened, because I knew what complicated meant in Mark's language. It meant he'd done something impulsive, promised someone something he couldn't deliver, and now he needed me to prevent the consequences. I said no, just one word, calm voice, no yelling, no lecture, no negotiation, and the silence on the other end wasn't surprise, it was cold. "No," he repeated like I'd spoken another language. "I'm not doing this anymore," I said. "I'm done paying for emergencies that you create." Then he did what he always did when he didn't get his way. He reached for the weapon that worked best. He went low. He brought up our dad's health scare from years ago and how family stepped up. He brought up the time our mom helped me move into my place like that was a financial debt I owed forever. He brought up every time he'd ever done anything remotely decent for me, and inflated it like it was a life-saving sacrifice. And then, when none of that made me fold, his voice changed again. Not angry, not loud, sharp. "Fine," he said. "Just remember this when you need something." I remember staring at the wall after I hung up, heart beating faster than it should for a phone call. Because I knew that sentence wasn't just bitterness, it was a promise. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that Mark was all talk, that he'd cool off, but there was this feeling I couldn't shake, like I'd finally moved a piece on a board my family didn't want me to touch. The next morning, my mom called before I even left for work. "Ethan," she said, and I could hear it in her voice. She'd already spoken to Mark. "Morning," I said carefully. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I was okay. She went straight to the point. "Your brother says you refused to help him." I did. A pause. "Then he needed you." "I've needed him to act like an adult for 10 years, I said. "I'm not doing it anymore." She sighed in that exhausted way that always made me feel like I was the difficult one. "Just be careful," she said. "Be careful," I repeated. I know how Mark gets when he feels cornered. That was my mother admitting without fully admitting that she knew my brother could be vindictive, and she still wasn't telling him to stop. She was warning me to manage him. I went to work with that sentence echoing in my head. Be careful. At the warehouse, I tried to lose myself in routine, inventory checks, a broken hydraulic line, an argument between two drivers that wasn't my problem. But I kept checking my phone during breaks like I was expecting bad news. Nothing came that day, or the next. Mark didn't text, didn't call, no apology, no negotiation, no "I overreacted," just silence. And if you've ever dealt with someone like that, you know silence isn't peace. Silence is planning. Over the next week, little things started happening that felt off. A neighbor mentioned a guy had been lingering near my driveway one afternoon. When I checked my doorbell camera, I saw a figure at the edge of the frame, hood up, face turned away, walking past slowly like he was looking. Then my mom left a voicemail that was weirdly cheerful, asking if I could come by this weekend because Mark might stop by too and it would be nice to have everyone together. I didn't call back right away. The idea of being cornered in my parents' living room with my brother performing injured innocence while my mom begged us to just move on made my stomach feel tight. I told myself I was being paranoid. But I also started doing small, careful things, locking my car twice, checking my keys, making sure my registration and insurance were in the glove box, not leaving anything valuable inside. It was like my instincts were trying to protect me before my brain would admit I needed protecting. The most uncomfortable part was realizing Mark knew exactly what mattered to me. He didn't care about my hobbies because I didn't really have any. He didn't care about my social life. He didn't care about my pride until he could use it. But my car, my job, my routine, those were the pillars of my independence. And Mark hated my independence more than he loved his own. I wish I could say I saw exactly what he planned. I didn't. Not specifically. But I felt the pressure building like the air before a storm. Because when someone like Mark stops asking, stops arguing, stops guilt-tripping, it's usually because they've found a different way to force your hand. And I didn't realize how far he was willing to go until the day I walked outside, looked at my driveway and saw an empty space where my Honda should have been. For a few seconds I just stood there, staring at the bare concrete like my eyes could force the car to reappear. My first thought was the dumb one. Maybe I parked on the street last night. Then the practical part of my brain kicked in. I knew exactly where I parked. I knew exactly where my keys were, hanging on the hook by my kitchen door, still there. And I knew I hadn't lent my car to anyone in weeks, because I'd made a point of not lending it to anyone in weeks. The air felt colder than it should have. I walked to the end of my driveway like I might find broken glass, a tow notice, something that made sense. Nothing. No tire marks I could see. No note. No orange sticker. I pulled out my phone and opened my doorbell camera app with shaky fingers. The camera faced my front steps and part of the driveway. It wasn't a perfect angle, but I could usually see when a delivery showed up or when my neighbor's cat wandered across. I scrubbed back through the night before. Around 2:13 a.m., the camera caught headlights sweeping across the edge of the frame. A few seconds later, a shadow moved, someone walking low, like they were trying to stay out of view. Then the sound, a faint metallic click that the microphone barely picked up. The video wasn't clear enough to see a face, but the movement didn't look like a random thief in a hurry. It looked careful, familiar even. My stomach twisted. I called work and told them I'd be late. My boss asked if everything was okay, and I said car issue, because it felt safer than saying I think someone stole my car. Then I did the thing you're supposed to do. I called the police non-emergency line. The dispatcher asked for my name, address, and the make, model, and plate number. I gave her all of it, then waited while she typed. When she asked if the car could have been towed, I said I didn't think so. When she asked if I'd lent it to anyone, I said no. She paused. Sir, I'm showing that your vehicle was reported stolen earlier this morning. My mouth went dry. By who? I can't provide that information over the phone, she said, voice neutral, trained. But I can confirm it's in our system as a stolen vehicle. A cold, sharp clarity hit me. Someone hadn't just taken my car. Someone had already called it in, and I knew exactly who had motive to do something that petty and cruel. Okay, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice from cracking. What do I do now? She told me an officer would be dispatched to take my statement, and she asked me to stay available. I thanked her and hung up, then stood in my driveway again like a man who'd been punched and didn't want to admit it. I didn't call Mark right away. That might sound weird, but I wanted to be sure. I wanted a sliver of doubt, because once I said his name out loud, it would mean admitting what kind of person my brother really was. So I called my mom first. She answered on the second ring, voice bright and casual like it was a normal Wednesday. Hi, honey. Mom, I said. Is Mark there? A beat. He's around. Why? My car is gone. Silence. Not confused silence. Not what do you mean gone? Silence. A careful silence. Then she said, too quickly, gone how? Gone like it's not in my driveway, I said. Gone like I called the police. She inhaled, slow. Ethan, are you sure you didn't misplace it? Maybe you parked. Mom, I kept my tone flat. Is Mark there? Another beat. Then I heard muffled voices on her end, a shuffling, like she'd covered the phone with her hand. When she came back, her voice was thinner. He's not here right now. I didn't believe her, but I didn't argue. I said, If you talk to him, tell him to call me." "Why would Mark?" she started, then stopped herself like she'd almost said something she couldn't take back. "Just tell him," I said, and I hung up. My hands were shaking now, and I hated that. I hated that my body was reacting like this was some life-or-death crisis when it was just a car. But it wasn't just a car. It was my independence, my ability to get to work, my proof that I could build a life without being tethered to Mark's chaos. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Mark. For a second I stared at his name like it was a trick. Then I answered. "Where's my car?" He didn't miss a beat. "Whoa, that's how you answer?" "Mark," I said, "where's my car?" He made a sound like a laugh. "I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't leave your stuff lying around." Rage climbed up my throat so fast it scared me. "Did you report it stolen?" A pause, just a fraction of a second, but it was there. Then he said, "Funny you ask that." My grip tightened on the phone. "Mark," he sighed, the way he always did when he wanted to sound reasonable. "Look, I'm not saying you deserve what happened, okay? But you've been acting different. Cold, like you're better than everyone." "This isn't about my attitude," I said. "Did you report my car stolen?" He chuckled again. "I didn't steal it, if that's what you're implying." That wasn't an answer. It was a dodge. And that was when I knew, in my bones, he was enjoying this. "Listen to me," I said, forcing each word out slowly. "The police are involved now. If you did something, you need to fix it." His voice sharpened. "Oh, now you care about consequences." I closed my eyes. I could picture him pacing, smug, feeding off the control. "Mark, I'm giving you one chance. Tell me what you did." He lowered his voice, like he was letting me in on a secret. "You think you can just cut me off and nothing happens? You think you can embarrass me, and I'm just supposed to take it?" "I didn't embarrass you," I said. "I said no." "Same thing," he snapped. Then he softened again. Fake calm. "Maybe this will teach you something." My stomach turned. "Where is it?" "I don't know," he said. "Maybe it'll turn up. Maybe it won't." Then he hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air like it might explain what kind of nightmare I'd stepped into. A knock came about 20 minutes later. 2 officers on my porch, one older, one younger. The younger one had a body camera clipped to his chest. I noticed it immediately, not because I was thinking about evidence yet, but because it made me hyper-aware that every word I said mattered. The older officer introduced himself as Officer Reynolds. The younger one was Officer Patel. They were polite, professional, not overly friendly, but not cold either. Officer Reynolds asked me to confirm the basics. Name, address, vehicle details, last time I saw it. I walked them through my evening, got home around 6:40, ate dinner, watched a game, went to bed around 11. Car was in the driveway. Keys were inside. No spare key missing as far as I knew. Officer Patel asked, "Do you have any idea who might have taken it?" I hesitated, then said, I think it might be family." Both of them looked at me a little differently at that. Officer Reynolds said, "Family disputes can complicate things. Has anyone had permission to drive the vehicle recently?" "No," I said, "not recently." Officer Patel asked if I had security cameras. I showed them the doorbell footage. They watched quietly, leaning in. The headlights, the shadow, the faint click. "It's hard to make out," Reynolds said, "but it does show someone approaching." Officer Patel nodded. "Do you recognize the person?" "No," I said, because I couldn't honestly claim I saw enough. But then I added, "I got a call from my brother right after I found out. He was not surprised." Officer Reynolds didn't react much, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "What's your brother's name?" I told him. "Mark Dawson." Officer Patel asked, "Is your brother the one who reported it stolen earlier?" My stomach dropped. I was told someone reported it, but the dispatcher wouldn't tell me who. Officer Reynolds exchanged a quick glance with Patel. Then he said, "Careful, we can't share everything, but I can tell you there is an earlier report associated with your vehicle. That does happen sometimes." "Sometimes," I repeated. "How does that happen?" Officer Reynolds' tone stayed even. "Sometimes a vehicle is taken without the owner's knowledge by someone who has access. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding. Sometimes there's a dispute, and one party reports it first." "A dispute," I said, my voice flat. Officer Patel asked, "Do you have any reason to believe someone would file a false report about your vehicle?" I didn't want to say it. Saying it made it real. Saying it meant my brother wasn't just irresponsible, he was dangerous in a quiet way. But I nodded. "Yes." Officer Reynolds asked me to come inside so we could continue the report at the table. He took out a small notepad, while Patel typed into a tablet. They asked about my relationship with Mark, if he had ever threatened me, if he had ever taken my car without permission before. I admitted the truth. He'd borrowed it in the past, and he'd sometimes kept it longer than agreed. But I'd stopped allowing it after he demanded money, and got angry when I refused. Officer Reynolds paused his writing. He demanded money from you. 2,000, I said. And when I said no, he told me to remember this when I need something. Officer Patel's expression tightened. That's not great. Reynolds nodded once, like he'd heard variations of this story 100 times. Do you know where your brother is right now? I don't, I said. My mom said he wasn't at their house, but I don't believe her. Reynolds asked if Mark had access to my keys. I told him no. I kept them inside. But then I remembered something and my chest tightened. A month earlier, Mark had been at my place for a quick chat after our mom begged me to hear him out. He'd used my bathroom. He'd walked through my kitchen. He'd lingered by the door like he always did, scanning, noticing. If he'd ever grabbed my spare key, if he'd ever made a copy, how would I even know? I hated how paranoid that made me sound. But I said it anyway. It's possible. I can't prove it, but it's possible. Officer Reynolds told me they'd put out a bolo for the vehicle, and if it was spotted, units would attempt to recover it. He gave me a case number and explained the next steps. Insurance, follow-up, possible investigation if there were leads. Then he said something that made my throat tighten again. Mr. Dawson, he said, I need to ask you directly. Is there any chance your brother is in possession of the vehicle right now? I stared at him. I think he is. Officer Patel asked. Did he admit it? No, I said. But he didn't deny it either. He said, maybe it'll turn up. Maybe it won't. Like he was enjoying the idea that I was stuck. Reynolds leaned back slightly, thoughtful. Okay, here's what I'm going to recommend. Don't confront him in person. Don't try to take the car back yourself if you find it. Call us. I nodded, but inside I was burning. Because that advice made sense in a normal world. In my world, confrontation was what Mark fed on. And he'd already escalated this beyond anything I'd ever imagined. When the officers left, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. Please don't make this worse. Mark is upset. Let's talk like adults. I read it 3 times, each time feeling my anger shift into something colder. Let's talk like adults. As if I was the one who'd created this. As if Mark wasn't the one who'd potentially committed a crime to punish me for saying no. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because if I did, I'd say something I could never take back. Instead, I called my insurance company, opened a claim, and answered the same questions all over again. Every time I said stolen, it felt surreal, like I was impersonating a version of myself whose life had fallen apart. By late afternoon, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, refreshing my doorbell camera feed like it was a lifeline. Then around 4:47 p.m. I got another call. Not Mark. An unknown number. I answered, and a man's voice said, "Is this Ethan Dawson?" "Yes. This is Officer Patel. We located your vehicle." My heart jumped so hard it hurt. "Where?" He gave me an intersection about 10 minutes from my house, near a strip of older apartment buildings and a small convenience store. "It's currently occupied," Patel added. My fingers went numb around the phone. Occupied by who? There was a pause. Then he said, "We have someone claiming they have permission to use it. We're going to sort that out. I need you to come to the scene with your ID and proof of ownership if you have it." I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "I'm on my way." As I grabbed my wallet and the folder where I kept my registration and insurance, one thought hammered through my head. Mark didn't just want my money. He wanted to make me look like the liar. And whatever story he was telling the police right now, he was counting on me panicking, yelling, reacting, giving him exactly what he needed to play the victim. So while I drove there in a rideshare, staring out the window like my life was happening to someone else, I made myself a promise. When I got to that scene, I was going to stay calm. Because if Mark had set a trap, the only way out was to let him talk long enough for the truth to catch up to him. The rideshare dropped me a half block away because 2 police cruisers were angled across part of the street, lights flashing but no sirens. People were doing that slow, curious sidewalk drift, pretending they were just passing by while obviously watching. I paid, got out, and the cold hit my face like a slap. And there it was. My Accord was parked crooked near the curb, half in front of a faded no parking sign, like whoever left it there didn't care if it got towed. Mark was leaning against the driver's side door with his arms folded, wearing that familiar smirk that always made my skin crawl. He looked relaxed, almost entertained. Two officers stood near him. One was Officer Patel. The other wasn't Reynolds. Different build, heavier jacket, older eyes. Both had body cameras mounted on their chests. I noticed the red recording light on one of them blinking steadily. Patel saw me first and lifted a hand slightly, guiding me toward the sidewalk rather than straight into the scene. "Mr. Dawson?" he asked. "Yes," I said, holding up my wallet like I didn't want to make any sudden moves. "Okay, hang back with me for a second," Patel said. His voice was calm, but his posture was protective, like he'd already decided this could turn ugly. Mark's head snapped toward us. "Oh look," he called out loudly. The owner finally showed up. That word owner came out with this sarcastic emphasis, like the whole idea was up for debate. I forced myself to keep walking at a normal pace. My heart was hammering, but I kept my shoulders loose. I didn't look at Mark too long. I looked at the officers, at the car, at the ground, anything but his face. Officer Patel asked for my ID. I handed it over. Then I pulled out my registration and insurance card from the folder I'd brought. "I can show you whatever you need," I said. Patel glanced at the documents and nodded. "Okay, so that is your vehicle. Plate matches, VIN matches, great." Then he lowered his voice. "Just so you know, the individual in possession is your brother, Mark Dawson. He's claiming he had permission to use it." I nodded once, like I'd expected nothing else. He did not. Patel's eyes flicked to my face like he was measuring whether I was going to explode. "All right, we're going to speak with both of you. I need you to stay calm and answer questions directly." "I will," I said, and I meant it. We walked closer. Mark stood straighter as I approached, like he was stepping onto a stage. The older officer addressed Mark first. "Sir, this is the registered owner. We're going to clarify a few things. Do you understand?" Mark put his hands up, palms out, like he was the reasonable one in this situation. "Absolutely. I've been trying to clarify this for like 30 minutes. The older officer turned toward me. "Sir, did you report this vehicle stolen today?" I blinked. "I did, yes. This morning, after I found it missing from my driveway." Mark scoffed loudly. "Of course he did." The older officer didn't react to Mark's tone. He just asked me, "Did you give your brother permission to drive your vehicle today?" "No," I said. Mark let out an exaggerated sigh. "That's not true." The officer held up a hand to slow things down. "Mark, you'll have your chance." "Ethan, have you ever given your brother permission to drive your vehicle in the past?" I answered honestly, because lying would destroy me here. "In the past, yes, but not recently. Not for weeks." Mark jumped on that instantly. "See? He's admitting it. He lets me use it all the time." "I said in the past," I replied, still calm. "Not today." Mark's eyes narrowed. He took a step toward me, like he couldn't stand that I wasn't reacting the way he wanted. "You're really going to do this," he said, voice low now, dangerous. "Over a car." "It's my car," I said evenly, "and you took it." Mark laughed, shaking his head as if I was embarrassing myself in public. "I didn't take it." "You know what, officer? This is what he does. He gets dramatic. He flips out and then later pretends nothing happened." The older officer's gaze sharpened. "Mark, how did you obtain the keys to the vehicle?" Mark's answer came too fast. "He gave them to me." "When?" the officer asked. Mark hesitated just a fraction. "Last week. He said I could use it if I needed to." I looked at him and felt something click into place. He was committing, fully committing, to a lie that could be checked. That meant he thought he had a backup story, or backup proof, or he thought the truth wouldn't matter, because our family would pressure me to drop it. The older officer turned to me. "Did you give him the keys last week?" "No," I said. "I haven't given him my keys at all." Mark's face hardened. He turned toward the officers again, voice shifting into performance. "Okay, look, here's the thing. He's mad at me because I asked him for help, money help, and he got all high and mighty about it. He's been acting like he wants to punish me." Patel's eyes flicked toward me again, quick, like, "Is there history here?" The older officer kept his tone neutral. "Do you have any proof that Ethan gave you permission to use the vehicle? Text messages, call logs, anything?" Mark shrugged, too casual. "We're family. We talk in person." The older officer nodded slowly, like he'd heard that 100 times and didn't like it. "Okay, then explain this. The vehicle was entered into the system as stolen earlier today. That report was made before Ethan called dispatch. Why would that be?" Mark's posture shifted, just slightly. His eyes darted first to Patel, then to me, then back to the older officer. "What?" Mark said, playing dumb. I don't know anything about that. The older officer didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Sir, I'm asking you directly. Did you make a report that this vehicle was stolen? Mark stared at him. No. I felt my chest tighten, because I knew that was a lie and I could feel the whole situation balancing on a knife's edge. If the officers believed Mark, this would become a civil matter, and I'd be stuck fighting my own family while my car sat here like a prop. But then Patel spoke, and his tone changed, more official, more clipped. Mark, he said, we have the call record. We know who called it in. Mark's face went pale for half a second, then flushed red. He recovered fast, but not fast enough. He laughed again, louder this time, trying to turn it into a joke. Oh my God, are you serious? You're doing this. The older officer took a small step closer. Answer the question. Mark swallowed. Okay, fine. Yes, I called it in. My stomach dropped anyway, even though I'd expected it. The officer asked, why? Mark's eyes flicked to me like a blade. Because he wouldn't answer his phone. Because he's been acting irrational. I thought he did something stupid and then was going to blame me, like he always does. I stared at him. What are you talking about? Mark cut me off, raising his voice just enough for nearby people to hear. You have anger issues, man. You've always had them. You snap, then you pretend you're calm. It's creepy. I felt my face heat, but I kept my voice level. I didn't take my own car. You did. Mark pointed at me like he'd been waiting to do it. I didn't steal it. I was trying to protect you. The older officer's jaw tightened. Protect him from what exactly? Mark spread his hands. From himself. From doing something he'd regret. From, I don't know, whatever he does when he gets like this. I realized what Mark was doing. He wasn't just trying to get away with taking my car. He was trying to poison the well, make me look unstable so any denial I made would sound like part of the pattern. It was the oldest trick in our family. If I complained, I was dramatic. If I got angry, I was proving their point. If I stayed calm, I was cold and creepy. I took a slow breath and looked at the older officer, not at Mark. Officer, I said, I have not given Mark permission to take my car. He demanded money from me last week. I refused. He told me I'd regret it. Then my car disappeared from my driveway overnight. I called it in stolen. He admitted to me on the phone that he wanted to teach me something. Mark snapped. That's not what I said. The older officer didn't respond to Mark. He asked me, do you have that phone call recorded? No, I said, but I can show you my call log. Patel nodded. We can document that. Mark scoffed. Call logs don't prove what was said. The older officer turned to Mark again. Mark, how did you get access to the keys? Mark's eyes narrowed. I told you, he gave them to me. The older officer didn't move. Ethan says he did not. If you didn't have his keys, how did you start the vehicle? This is a push-start model. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd arrived, he looked stuck. He recovered by going on offense again. Are you accusing me of breaking into my own brother's house now? The older officer's voice stayed flat. I'm asking a question. How did you start the vehicle? Mark's gaze jumped to the crowd again, as if looking for sympathy. Then he said, I had a spare. A spare key? Patel asked. Yeah, Mark said, like it was obvious. Because he's let me use the car before. I felt ice slide down my spine. I don't have a spare out here, I said. My spare is inside my house. Mark shook his head violently. No, you gave it to me months ago. That's a lie, I said. I never gave you my spare. The older officer raised his chin slightly. All right, here's what we're going to do. Ethan, do you want to press charges for unauthorized use of your vehicle? Mark's head whipped toward him. Press charges? Are you insane? We're family. The phrase hit me like a slap, because it was the same weapon every time. Family, family, family. As if family meant Mark could do whatever he wanted. I looked at my car, at the driver's seat where Mark had been sitting like it belonged to him, at the smudges on the window, at the empty space in my driveway that morning. I want my car back, I said, and I want this documented fully. Mark's eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw something like panic behind the anger. Patel's voice softened slightly, but his words didn't. We can document. We can also pursue charges if the owner wants. But we need clear facts. And right now, Mark's admitting he reported it stolen, and he's in possession of it. Mark jumped in, voice rising. Because I was trying to protect him. I thought it was stolen, and I recovered it. Isn't that what you want? Recovery. The older officer didn't blink. You reported it stolen. Then you recovered it by driving it yourself? Mark stuttered. No, I mean I found it. Someone else had it. I got it back. I stared at him. Who had it, Mark? Mark snapped his head at me. Shut up. The older officer's tone sharpened. Sir, do not tell him to shut up. Answer the question. Who had the vehicle? Mark's lips pressed tight. He looked trapped, and I could almost see him calculating. He needed a villain that wasn't him, but he didn't have one ready. I don't know, he said finally. Some guy, Patel asked. Describe him. Mark hesitated again. I didn't get a good look. The older officer asked. Where did you find it? Mark's eyes darted to the convenience store sign like it might save him. Over there, parked. I recognized it. So you just got in and drove it, Patel said. Mark's voice turned defensive. Yes, because it's my brother's car. Without his permission, I said, still calm. Mark spun toward me, face twisting. You're doing this because you're mad about money. I'm doing this because you stole my car, I replied. That was when Mark took a step forward like he was going to get in my face. Instinctively, both officers shifted too, subtle, controlled, but ready. Back up, the older officer ordered. Mark froze, then raised his hands again in mock innocence. Wow, okay, so now I'm the threat, Patel said. Mark, you need to calm down. Mark laughed, but it sounded thin now. I am calm. He's the one who's— Stop, the older officer said, cutting him off. Ethan, do you have any text messages from Mark about the money request? Anything showing motive? I pulled out my phone immediately, grateful for something concrete. I scrolled with trembling fingers and found the thread from last week. Mark, need 2K by tomorrow. Don't be weird about it. Me, no, I can't. Mark, wow, okay, remember this. I held the screen out. Patel leaned in to read. The older officer read too, expression tightening. Patel looked up at Mark. You sent this? Mark's face went stiff. Yeah, so what? He's my brother. The older officer's voice dropped lower, more serious. Mark, that message reads like a threat, and now you're in possession of the vehicle after reporting it stolen. This is not looking good. Mark's mouth opened, and for a second he looked like he might finally shut up. But then he did what Mark always did when he was cornered. He went for my reputation. He's lying, Mark snapped. He's trying to ruin me. He always does this. He's jealous. He's bitter. He thinks he's better than everyone because he's got a steady job and a boring life. I didn't respond. I just looked at Patel and said quietly, he's trying to provoke me. Patel nodded slightly, like he understood. The older officer said, Mark, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you have any proof Ethan gave you permission to use this vehicle today? Mark's eyes were wild now. No, because he doesn't put anything in writing. Because he plays these games. The older officer exhaled through his nose. All right. Then he turned toward Patel and said something I didn't expect, but that made my pulse spike again. Let's pull the audio from the initial stolen vehicle call, he said. If he claimed it was stolen and also admits he's driving it, that's a false report. And we're not letting this turn into a he said, she said when we've got recordings. Mark's face drained of color. I felt my stomach flip. Because suddenly this wasn't just about my car. This was about the moment Mark's own words, recorded, official, impossible to twist with family guilt, were about to become the thing that exposed him. Mark tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. You can't be serious. Over a family misunderstanding. The older officer looked him dead in the eye. It stops being a misunderstanding when law enforcement is used as a weapon. Those words landed like a weight. And for the first time in my life, I saw Mark realize he might not be able to talk his way out. Patel stepped aside to make a call, likely to a supervisor or dispatch, while the older officer asked me to stand near the cruiser. Do not engage with him, he told me quietly. I nodded. Mark, meanwhile, pulled out his phone and started typing aggressively. I didn't need to see the screen to know who he was texting. Our mom, because that was always the next move. Get her involved, get her crying, get her to call me and beg me to just let it go. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Mom. I looked at it, then at the officers, and I didn't answer. Mark watched me ignore the call and his face twisted with fury, like I'd broken an unspoken rule. A second later, Mom texted, Please, answer. This is getting serious. I stared at the message and felt something harden in me. It was already serious the moment Mark decided to punish me by involving police. Patel returned, expression focused. Okay, he said to the older officer. Dispatch is sending over the audio file and the incident notes. Also, there's Bodycam from our initial contact with Mark today. I blinked. Initial contact? Patel nodded. We spoke with him earlier. Before you arrived. He gave a statement. Mark's head snapped up. That was not a statement. That was, Mark, the older officer said, cutting him off. Stop. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears because now I understood what that meant. Mark had already been talking, already been building his lie, and it had been recorded from multiple angles. Call audio, officer reports, body cam footage, before he ever saw me, before he could adjust his story based on my reaction. A weird calm settled over me. Not relief yet, but something close to it. Because for the first time Mark wasn't controlling the narrative. The system was. The older officer looked at me. Ethan, we're going to recover your vehicle and return it to you today, but we may need you to provide a formal written statement at the station. There may be charges for unauthorized use and for filing a false report. Mark snapped, voice sharp with panic now. Charges? You can't charge me. I was trying to help. The older officer didn't argue. He just said, that's not what your earlier statements indicate. Mark froze. I watched my brother's face, really watched it, and saw the exact moment he realized what he'd said earlier might be coming back to destroy him. He took a step backward, looking around like he wanted an exit. Then he did something that made my stomach tighten again. He looked straight at me and hissed, low enough that only I could hear. If you do this, you're dead to me. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I didn't give him anything. I just looked at him and said quietly, you did this to yourself. Mark's eyes flared with hatred. And right then I had the unsettling feeling that the worst part wasn't the stolen car. The worst part was going to be hearing exactly what he'd said on that body cam when he thought he was still in control. Officer Patel walked me to the side of the cruiser while the older officer, his name tag read Harris, stayed closer to Mark. Harris wasn't yelling, but his presence had that quiet, immovable authority that made it clear Mark couldn't bully his way through this. Ethan, Patel said, I'm going to level with you. These kinds of family situations can get messy fast. Our job is to stick to what we can prove. I nodded. I get it. He looked at my documents again. You're the registered owner. That's not in question. The question is whether Mark had permission. So we're going to rely on the timeline and the recorded statements. Mark was still talking, but now his voice was frantic, not smug. This is insane, he kept saying. He's doing this to me because he's petty. He's always been petty. He's trying to ruin my life. Harris held up a hand. Mark, stop talking for a second. You're making this worse for yourself. That sentence, making this worse, hit Mark like a threat. He shut his mouth, but his jaw was clenched so tight I could see it from 10 feet away. Patel lowered his voice. We're going to have you come down to the station to give a formal statement. It's better if we do it properly. Also, we may need to review your doorbell footage and your phone logs. Fine, I said. And one more thing, Patel added. Do you have any weapons in the vehicle? No, I said immediately. No, okay, just routine. Harris motioned to me and Patel. All right, here's what's happening. We're going to separate you two. Ethan, you'll follow Patel to the station. Mark, you're staying with me until we finish verifying the false report details. Do you understand? Mark's eyes widened. Separate us. Like I'm a criminal. Harris didn't blink. Right now, you're a subject in an investigation involving a false report and an unauthorized use complaint. So yes, we're separating you. Mark turned toward my car like he might try to get in. Harris shifted his stance slightly, blocking him without even touching him. Mark stopped. His hands trembled when he shoved them into his jacket pockets. Patel asked me, do you have a ride? My car's right there, I said, nodding toward the Accord. Patel shook his head. Not yet. It's considered part of the incident right now. We'll release it after documentation. So I sat in the back seat of Patel's cruiser, not cuffed, not detained, but still feeling like I'd fallen into a version of my life where nothing was normal. The plastic seat was cold through my jeans. The partition between the front and back made every sound sharper. As Patel drove, I watched the street slide by and tried to slow my breathing. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. Please don't do this. You know your brother. He's emotional. Emotional. Like that word explained away theft and police reports. I didn't reply. I couldn't trust myself to reply. At the station, Patel led me into a small interview room with a table bolted to the floor and a camera in the corner. He offered me water. I took it, mostly to have something to do with my hands. He said, just start from the beginning. Tell me about the money request, the refusal, and what happened this morning. So I did. I kept it factual. Dates, times, words said. I told him about Mark's text. Remember this. I told him about my doorbell footage. I told him about the phone call where Mark said, maybe it'll turn up, maybe it won't. Patel typed as I spoke, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Has Mark ever threatened you before? Not like this, I said. He's said things, he's implied things, but this is new. Has he ever taken your vehicle without permission? I hesitated. He's kept it longer than agreed, but I used to give permission. I stopped. Patel nodded. All right. Then Harris came in, and I could tell the second he stepped through the door that something had changed. He shut the door behind him, looked at Patel, then looked at me. Ethan, he said, we've got the audio of the initial call. My mouth went dry. Okay. Harris pulled a chair and sat, then placed a small recorder on the table like it was evidence from a crime show. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't need to. We're going to play it, he said. I want you to listen. Don't interrupt. Just listen. I nodded. Patel hit a key on his tablet, and the room filled with Mark's voice, clear, confident, familiar in the worst way. This is Mark Dawson, the recording said. My brother's car is stolen. It's a gray Honda Accord. He's been acting unstable, and I think someone took it because he left it unlocked. He's not answering his phone, and I'm worried he'll do something stupid. My stomach clenched so hard it felt like nausea. Mark's voice kept going, smooth and rehearsed. I'm trying to help him. He gets angry. He says things. He's not in a good place. I just want this handled before it gets worse. I stared at the tabletop. My fingers were clenched around the water bottle so tight the plastic crinkled. Harris stopped the audio. Then he said, quietly, that call came in at 6:18 a.m. I blinked. I didn't even notice my car was missing until after 7. Patel nodded. That's the point. My chest felt tight. So he called it in stolen before I even knew. Right, Harris said, and he positioned himself as the concerned, responsible party. He also suggested you were unstable. I swallowed hard. That's what he does. Harris studied me for a beat, then said, now here's the body cam from the first contact. Patel turned the tablet so I could see. The video showed the street from earlier, but before I arrived. Mark was standing next to my car, talking to an officer. Harris from the angle. Mark's voice on the body cam was even worse than the audio call because I could see his face. He looked almost pleased with himself. He told Harris, yeah, I recovered it. I knew where it would be. He's punishing me because I asked him for help. He wants me to suffer. Harris's voice on the footage was calm. So you found the car and drove it here. Mark shrugged. I drove it so it wouldn't get stolen again. I'm the only one trying to be responsible. Then Harris asked on camera, do you have permission from the registered owner to drive it right now? Mark hesitated, and I saw it. A small pause, a quick glance away. Then he smiled and said, of course, he always lets me use it. Harris's next question hit like a hammer. Where is the key? Mark patted his pocket and pulled out my key fob. My key fob. I felt my vision narrow, like the room tilted. On the body cam, Harris said, where did you get that? Mark laughed. He gave it to me. Look, I'm not a criminal. I'm his brother. Harris asked again. When did he give it to you? Mark's answer changed from what he'd said on the street earlier. On the body cam, he said, a couple months ago. I looked up at Patel, voice rough. He told you months ago. Then he told you last week. Then he told you some guy had it. Patel's face was tight with frustration. Yes. Harris stopped the video and folded his hands. Mark has contradicted himself multiple times, on recorded lines. That's the body cam, plus the initial 911, non-emergency audio. I stared at the table. My throat burned, because it wasn't just that he stole my car. It was that he'd tried to paint me as unstable to make himself look like the hero. Harris continued, we also did a quick check. The spare key claim doesn't hold up. Your model's key fob is coded. If he had a spare, it would still be in the system, but he's physically in possession of your actual key fob. I swallowed. So he took my keys from my house. Patel said carefully. We can't state that as fact yet, but we can investigate it. Harris leaned forward slightly. Ethan, I need to ask, do you want to pursue charges? That question hung in the air like smoke. For most of my life, I'd been trained to avoid this moment, to smooth things over, to be the bigger person. But every time I'd been the bigger person, Mark had gotten smaller in character and bigger in entitlement. I heard Mark's voice in my head. Maybe this will teach you something. And I realized he'd been right, just not the way he meant. It was teaching me that if I didn't draw a hard line, he would keep escalating until something truly irreversible happened. Yes, I said, voice steady. I do. Patel nodded once. Harris didn't look surprised. All right, Harris said. Then we'll document unauthorized use of a vehicle and filing a false report. We'll forward it to the prosecutor's office. Depending on prior history and the exact statute, this can carry serious consequences. My chest tightened anyway. Not because I wanted Mark protected, but because I could already see the family fallout coming like a train. Harris stood. We're going to bring Mark in. You'll stay here. I nodded, and as soon as the door shut behind him, my hands started shaking again. Delayed adrenaline, delayed grief, delayed anger, all of it hitting at once. Patel kept his voice calm. You're doing the right thing. I don't know what I'm doing, I said honestly. I just can't keep living like this. Patel glanced at the camera in the corner. Just stick to facts. Let the recording speak. A few minutes later, through the wall, I heard muffled shouting. Mark's voice. Loud. Insistent. Then Harris's voice. Low, commanding. Then a chair scraping. Then Mark again, sharper and panicked. You can't do this. He's lying. He's always lied. Patel looked at me. He's being interviewed. I stared at the door, heart pounding. Because I knew Mark. I knew how he performed under pressure. He would cry if it helped. He'd rage if it helped. He'd invent new villains if it helped. And he'd blame me no matter what. Another 5 minutes passed. Then Harris came back in, expression grim. Ethan, he said, Mark is refusing to calm down. He's also admitted something we needed. My stomach dropped. What? Harris looked directly at me. He admitted he took the key from your house earlier in the week. He claims you owed him because you used to help him. For a second I couldn't speak. The betrayal wasn't new, but hearing it said plainly. He took the key, made it feel like the floor had shifted. Patel exhaled sharply. That's significant. Harris nodded. It is. That strengthens the case. I swallowed hard. So what happens now? Harris's answer was careful. He's being processed for the false report and unauthorized use. Depending on how the prosecutor views it, there may be additional charges. But for tonight, the immediate priority is returning your vehicle to you and ensuring you're safe. Safe. The word made my skin prickle. Because my brother was the kind of man who didn't accept consequences quietly. Harris said, We'll release your car once our documentation is complete. You may also want to change your locks and consider a protective order if you feel threatened. I nodded, though my mind was already racing. Because I knew the next step in this story wasn't going to be legal. It was going to be personal. My phone buzzed again. A call this time. Mom, again. And right under it, a text from an unknown number. It was Mark. How does it feel to be the villain now? I stared at the message until my eyes blurred. Then I showed it to Patel without saying a word. Patel's expression hardened. Keep that. Do not respond. I nodded. But inside, something settled into place. Cold and clear. Mark wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. He was still trying to control the story. And the only thing that would stop him wasn't me arguing, or pleading, or explaining. It was the truth. Recorded. Documented. Undeniable. Finally reaching the one place he'd always hidden behind. Our family. 2 hours later, Officer Patel walked me out through the station lobby with my paperwork in a manila envelope and my key fob sealed inside a small evidence bag that they'd cut open and returned to me after photographing it. My car was parked in the lot, freshly tagged with a small evidence sticker near the windshield. Nothing dramatic, just a reminder that what happened wasn't family drama. It was a documented incident. Before I got in, Patel said, Ethan, I'm going to say this plainly. Change your locks tonight if you can. If you can't, at least secure your spare key. And don't engage with your brother. Save everything he sends. I nodded. Thank you. He looked like he wanted to say more but stayed professional. And if he shows up at your home, call us immediately. Driving my Accord home felt surreal. Everything in the cabin looked normal. My coffee-stained cup holder, the little scratch near the glove box, the same faint lemon scent from the air freshener I always forgot to replace. But the normalness was the point. Mark had used my car like a weapon because he knew it was something I valued. He'd tried to turn my stability into leverage. When I pulled into my driveway and parked in the exact spot it had been stolen from, I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and just breathed. Then I did what Patel said. I called a locksmith. It was after hours, so it cost more than I liked, but I didn't care. While I waited, I pulled every spare key I owned into a single drawer and taped it shut like that would keep the past from sneaking in again. While I was doing that, my phone buzzed. Another text from Mom. Your father is furious. Mark is crying. Please, Ethan, please don't press charges. This will destroy the family. I read it twice, and I realized something that made me go completely still. In her message, she didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't say, "I'm sorry he did this." She didn't say, "Are you safe?" She went straight to protecting the family image, protecting Mark. The next buzz was another text, this time from my dad. "Call me, now." So I did. I wasn't ready, but I did. He answered with a hard, clipped, "What the hell are you doing?" I kept my voice calm. "Dad, Mark reported my car stolen as revenge. The police have the call audio and Bodycam. He lied. It's not a debate." My dad exhaled sharply like I was being difficult on purpose. "He's your brother. Brothers fight." "This isn't a fight," I said. "This is him using the police to punish me because I refused to give him money." My dad's tone rose. "He said he was worried about you. He said you've been acting." "Stop," I said, and my own voice surprised me. Not loud, just firm. "If you want to know what he said, go ask the officers for the report. It's recorded. He called me unstable. He took my key from my house. He drove my car without permission. Then he changed his story 3 times. Silence. Then my dad said, quieter but colder, "You're really going to let him get charged?" I swallowed. "He chose this, not me." My dad's voice shook slightly, anger mixed with fear. "Do you know what this does to a person?" And there it was, the same question no one asked about me. What does it do to a person to be treated like a wallet? What does it do to a person to have his own brother paint him as unstable to the police? I said, "It does exactly what it's doing right now. It forces reality." My dad hung up on me. I stood in my kitchen, phone in my hand, listening to the deadline and realizing I'd just crossed a line our family had protected for decades. I refused to play along. The locksmith arrived an hour later, changed my locks, and handed me new keys that felt heavier than they should have. After he left, I sat at my table and finally let myself feel the grief underneath the anger. Because even when someone deserves consequences, it still hurts when that someone is your brother. The next day, my workplace asked for an update. I told my boss the truth in a simplified way. My car was stolen, recovered, and I'm working with police. He didn't pry. He just told me to take the day if I needed it. I took the day. Not to rest. Rest wasn't possible, but to prepare. Because I knew what was coming next. The family meeting. It happened 2 days later at my parents' house. I didn't want to go, but part of me needed to see how far they'd go to minimize it. I arrived early and parked on the street, not in their driveway. A small choice, but it mattered. Inside, my mom's eyes were red like she'd been crying for days. My dad stood stiff near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed like he was guarding the house from me. And Mark was on the couch like a wounded prince, eyes puffy, jaw tight, hands clasped together like he was praying for patience. When I walked in, Mark looked up and gave me a slow shake of his head like I'd disappointed him. Mom rushed into the silence. "Ethan, please, let's all just talk." Mark spoke before I could. "I can't believe you did this," he said, voice shaking in a way that sounded practiced. "I was trying to help you, and you called the cops on me." I looked at him and felt something strange. Not anger, clarity. I said, "No. You called the cops. You reported my car stolen. You called me unstable. The police have your audio. They have Bodycam. You lied." My mom flinched. "Ethan." I held up a hand, not aggressive, just steady. "Mom, I'm not doing this circle anymore." My dad stepped forward. "We're not here to litigate. We're here because you're tearing the family apart." I nodded once. "No." Mark tore it apart the moment he decided my no meant he could punish me. Mark scoffed, then leaned forward, his voice turning sharp. "You don't get it. You've always been selfish. You think because you have a job and a little house you're better than us." I felt my pulse spike, but I stayed calm. "This isn't about my house. It's about you stealing my car." Mark's face twisted. "I didn't steal it. I borrowed it. You let me borrow it all the time." I took my phone out of my pocket, opened the folder, and slid it across the coffee table like a card in a game. It was the incident number, the officer's information, and the summary Patel had printed for me, including the time of Mark's call, the contradiction in his statement, and the fact that he admitted taking my key. My dad stared at the paper like it was written in another language. Mom's hand trembled when she picked it up. This can't be right." "It is," I said. "And if you want more, request the Bodycam. It's public record with the right process. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm telling you the truth." Mark's eyes flashed. "So you're really going to ruin me over this?" I didn't raise my voice. "You tried to ruin me over $2,000. The room went quiet. That sentence landed harder than anything else I could have said. My mom looked at Mark, then at me. "Mark," she whispered, "did you take his key?" Mark's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at my dad, desperate for backup. My dad's voice was low. "Answer her." Mark stood up abruptly, anger exploding through the performance. "Fine. Yes, I took it, because he's been acting like he's above everyone. He needed a reality check." There it was. No denial, no twisting, just the truth, finally spoken out loud in the one place it mattered most. My mom's face crumpled. My dad looked like someone had pulled a chair out from under him. And Mark looked at all of us like we were the unreasonable ones for reacting. I said, "You don't get to give me a reality check by committing a crime." Mark stepped closer, voice hissing. "You think this makes you a hero?" I shook my head. "No, it makes me done." My dad's voice was thick. "Mark, what were you thinking?" Mark threw his hands up. "I was thinking Ethan needed to learn he can't just cut me off and act like he doesn't owe anyone anything." That word "owe" echoed in my head because it confirmed what I'd always suspected. Mark didn't see my help as kindness. He saw it as a contract he could enforce. My mom started crying again, but this time it wasn't the soft, pleading cry she used on me. It was the shocked kind. The kind that happens when your favorite story collapses. I stood up, calm, and said, "I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to tell you my boundaries." They all looked at me. "I will not give Mark money again," I said. "I will not lend him my car. I will not cover for him, excuse him, or smooth this over. If he contacts me to threaten me, I will report it. If he shows up at my house, I will call the police." Mark laughed bitterly. "You're unbelievable." I looked him in the eye. "No, Mark, you are." Then I turned to my parents. "I love you, but I'm not going to be the family's shock absorber anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it can't be built on me sacrificing my safety and dignity to protect Mark from consequences." My dad didn't answer right away. My mom just cried quietly, staring at the report like it was proof of a death in the family. Because in a way it was. It was the death of the version of our family where Mark could do anything, and I would still be expected to make it okay. In the weeks that followed, the legal side moved slowly. There were calls from the prosecutor's office, a request for my doorbell footage, a formal statement confirming I did not give permission. Mark tried to message me twice more, one angry, one weirdly apologetic. I didn't respond to either. I saved them. My mom called less. When she did, she sounded different, tired, like she was seeing the costs of enabling for the first time. My dad didn't call for a while. When he finally did, he didn't apologize. He's not built that way. But he said, "I saw the report. I didn't realize Mark said those things about you." It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was something real. Mark, though, did what people like Mark do when the spotlight shifts. He found a new audience. He told extended family I'd set him up. He implied I was unstable. He said I was punishing him for being down on his luck. But for the first time in my life, his story didn't stick the way it used to. Because there was something stronger than his charisma. There was audio. There was Bodycam footage. There was an incident report with timestamps and contradictions. And when a couple relatives tried to guilt me with, "But he's your brother," I said the same sentence every time. He used the police to punish me. It's recorded. If you want to discuss it, read the report. Most of them stopped pushing after that. Not because they suddenly became brave, but because evidence makes denial uncomfortable. My car is still my car. I still park it in my driveway, nose in, slightly to the left. But I don't take it for granted anymore. Not because I'm scared it will be stolen, but because I'm aware of what it represents. It represents a life I built without permission. And the real ending to all this isn't that my brother got caught lying on Bodycam. It's that for the first time I stopped letting my family's reality be dictated by whoever lied the loudest. If there's a lesson here, it's not never help family. It's this: if someone uses your help as a leash, it was never help to them. It was control. And the moment I finally refused to be controlled, Mark didn't just get angry. He got reckless. That's the part I'll never forget, because it taught me that boundaries don't create the monster, they reveal it.